We've got a spectacular session today, though I said that about every on the offense we've done so far. This is a chance to compare notes with friends, and I think today with Elizabeth is going to be a particularly interesting case study because I think this is an example where personal leadership led to great business leadership. And I think, as you'll see, Elizabeth was clear and courageous and intentional about what happened. And it ended up, I think, benefiting both Simplify Compliance and also the people she works with. It's kind of maybe a bit of a good fairy tale story. So I think we're going to enjoy today. So thanks everyone for signing on. Obviously, this is Renewed's on the offense. This is the last one before the summit, which is coming up in 2 weeks. So I'm looking forward to seeing most of you in DC, which will be a wonderful, wonderful time to reconnect. Lots of hugs and friendships and wisdoms and all that sort of stuff. So Elizabeth, first of all, thank you.
Yes.
Setting up this call has been humorous and definitely I've enjoyed the conversations. I hope all of you do today. So I think Elizabeth and I agreed the best way to start this discussion was to just take a look at what began the success story of, as I said, what sort of created a win-win-win-win-win kind of situation, I believe, for herself, for her team, for Simplify Compliance. Oops. 434, if you could mute. This happens all the time. So would you mind starting out by just talking about the courageous decision you made so that everybody kind of understands the context, and then we'll go into the results, which is, interesting. So
yeah, so you call it the courageous decision. At the time, I was thinking of it and mostly caps my big, stupid career decision. So this is a quick story of falling down the career ladder and being happy with it. So I see some familiar faces, a lot of folks who I work with. So you may be familiar with the story and you may not have seen me in a little while. I was 5 years ago marks a pretty big decision that I made. I started my career at it exists as a brand right now, and it's part of Simplify Compliance, but it was a company called HC Pro. And it's a company that I fell in love with immediately and worked very hard and got my dream position, and one that people in this industry don't get to experience very often. I was made president of the healthcare division at Simplify Compliance. For me, this was the result of years of hard work, some of being in the right place at the right time. And I had a job where I was overseeing marketing, sales, product, editorial, development. I think at my peak, I probably had 90 to 100 direct and indirect reports. It was a job that I took great pride in, particularly the time where I oversaw a merger of what was HC Pro with BLR. And I know a lot of you are familiar with that business. And so it was a job I'd worked hard for. I was incredibly fortunate to have. And this makes the decision a little bit tougher that I'm going to talk about. I actually really I loved my boss. I loved the people I worked with. I liked the work. And in a way, if those things weren't true, what I'm about to talk about would have been easier. If there was some kind of evil force here, or ethically I wasn't happy, there wasn't. I was happy.
yeah.
But I began to feel that something wasn't quite right. I was a few steps removed from the work that really brings me joy, which I now know is more direct customer contact and product management.
Well, you come out of a journalism background too.
I do.
So you've got you're tied to products for the rest of your career. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is completely self-imposed, and I realize this, but I would work, parent, work. And I would wake up at midnight and answer emails. I would wake up at 6, start working right away. The travel was very difficult. I, at the time, had a young child, and I had been thinking about something not feeling quite right for probably a good year. And then I made the big, what thought at the time was the big, stupid career decision, and I resigned. I actually went into the meeting with Dan Oswald planning to resign completely. Dan was a wonderful human being, and we found a way for me to stay on part-time, and I ended up taking a more focused role in the division that I had been managing, just doing product management. So I took on, it's morphed a little bit over time, but it's essentially where I'm settled now as a product director for healthcare. And very long story short, when I was making this decision, several people said to me, "You're gonna get so bored. You're gonna regret it." And I can tell you that I have been neither bored nor have I regretted this decision. And I'm happy, and I found both new purpose and energy. And we talk about energy and feeling refreshed for both my work and then
Yeah.
my personal life.
Could I, I want to drill down on the personal life thing and obviously the strategic business impact it had in the time we have here. But I mean, besides the goodwill that you shared with your team and with Dan Oswald, who most of the people on this call know very well, it also sounds like because you were clear about what you needed, that probably I'm imagining the communication was clearer, which to me, it might be part of the reason this worked well for you and it worked well. Is that true? Would you talk about that just a little bit?
David, I'm glad you brought that up because we didn't talk about this before, but
Yeah.
you're right, and I got it wrong at first. So I
Oh,
had been kind of hinting to Dan for a while. I'm like, I'm feeling kind of pulled in a bunch of different directions, and he's like, if you need to be flexible some days, be flexible. And I was like, great, but that's not actually what I needed.
yeah.
I really
Mhm.
needed something more. And so when I got to the point when I made that decision, I was very explicit about like I actually needed to be part-time.
Yeah. Yeah. So the clarity, I
Yes.
mean, maybe when I use the term courageous, maybe that's a little over the top, but I think getting to a point where you have clear intentionality about something else, it just makes it easier within an
Mhm.
organization, makes it easier on yourself. And I think, I mean, a lot of the people on this call who are business owners, for instance, we all know that you can sort of feel like something's wrong, but then you never quite do something about it. So I think to get to that point of clarity in that process is something particularly noteworthy. But you mentioned sort of your self-worth and identity. It sounds like there might have been a little bit of a trough there, but then once you got on the new mission, did that go away pretty quickly or just at the personal level?
It did, and one of the things when we talk, I think especially parents, and I see this a lot with women. One of the things I did learn very quickly is that it was really important to think of myself with a certain sort of roundness. And at first, I was like, work-life balance is being a mom and being at work,
Yeah.
and that's me being in the service of other people, which is important, but it wasn't enough. And so what
Oh,
I learned very quickly is and this is not easy, but I started to, I had no, when I say I had no hobbies before this, I mean, I, I was the driest human ever. I was doing nothing. And so I started to re-explore my old, and for me they're bigger than hobbies, some old passions, and learn new hobbies. And for me, they're all in the world of sports and athletics, just because that's my thing. And what I have found with that is making that decision and sticking to that commitment. I am full time now, but sticking to that commitment of having something that's for me and just for me has kind of reinflated myself and has kind of built back up. I have an identity that's apart from work and apart from being a mom, which is important.
yeah, yeah. So when you're doing sports, do you consider that to be in service to yourself?
I
Did you?
do. I
Yeah,
do. And it's hard because I am a rugby player. I'm very
yeah,
often the oldest rugby player you will find. And that is a team sport. And I do believe in when you're playing a team sport, you're playing for your teammates, but it's different. And I did an individual, I pursued the sport of strongman and I competed twice. I totally recommend it. I know it sounds crazy, but that was an individual sport and it was good to do that.
I think I'll make a note that Renewed should start a strongman team.
Okay.
We have a lot of applicants on this call who will definitely sign on immediately.
You will love it.
Could you just before we move into sort of the business implications, and obviously there's a lot more to talk about here, but the other thing in the stories you describe it is, and I think this is pretty common for a lot of Renewed members, we're very fortunate compared to the rest of the global economy. But it just sounds like there was an incredible amount of trust in these discussions between you and Dan, between you and your team.
Yes.
That sort of thing.
Yes.
I mean, that you have to earn that, I guess. But anything come to mind on that subject?
Yeah, I will. So I went into that conversation. I trusted Dan and but I also knew that he was not, his obligation is to the company. And so I actually went into that conversation. My fallback career, I was going to coach high school soccer and maybe even be a preschool teacher. So I was prepared to walk away, and he created this position, and it was, and you can be very vulnerable. And I think, as leaders, I know there's a lot of leaders on this call. I think that is one thing that, to build that trust and, this sounds silly, but a safe space where people can come to you without fear of retribution allows people to make decisions which for them are going to create a sense of purpose in being. And the benefit that you get as a leader in the company is people want to be in an environment like that.
Yeah. I mean, you'd like to, in an ideal world, it's also more thrilling to be working with a group of people who enjoy what they're doing and they're motivated by what they're doing and feel that the work's meaningful and it's having an impact within the organization and, maybe within your marketplace too. Those things are all valuable. I'd love to stay with just like the personal impact, because in the setup calls we talked about like a little bit about the insecurities and all the things that would trigger. So maybe I could just summarize it by saying the fact that you did get to this point of clarity for the rest of the people on the call. I have the feeling that maybe headed off, it would have been worse than it was if it wasn't that you and Dan and other people involved in this were able to do the transition. But kind of going into the business thing, and first of all, let's start with that, and then I'd like to talk about the people you're working with and how that worked out. But you said you described it as starting a division. Just describe this invention you came up with to come up with a win-win situation.
Yeah, and so to be clear, when I moved to the product role, we did a reorganization, and I got a new but old team. So some members of my team that I managed before with some new folks, and there's a few iterations. But what this and just to set this is important because it'll frame everything. We had a business that probably looks very similar to a lot of you on the phone, where we had we essentially, even though we were a B2B, we were in a way B2C in that we created individual products for individual purchasers. Now, I don't know if any of you in your career have had consultants come in to look at your business, but the solution is always the same thing. Stop doing these little products and move to something big. And in theory, I totally agree. But the question that you have is, okay, so are we going to walk away from these individual products that are throwing off cash and frankly have built goodwill with our customers? This is what they know us for. And then also, if I'm building a new product, are you okay with there being an EBITDA switch for 1 to 2 years where we're not seeing that cash flow and we are spending money? And the answer is usually no. And so what in this new role, when I was able to focus on product development again, instead of, and don't get me wrong, just as important, instead of P&L and talking P&Ls and talking with investors and being pulled into all these meetings, I could really focus on the product needs. And and I'm using that term because it's people on this call, it's people who I worked with through SIPA, namely Victoria Meller, um, came up with a vision for our move to enterprise solutions while keeping the individual products running. So I keep using the analogy of changing the tires in a car while you're driving 60 miles per hour. And so the idea there, after talking with Victoria, working with my team and talking with customers, is we started to take we talked with a lot of customers, and first thing we want to know is, what do you know and like about us? And one of the bits of feedback is that, oh, I wish that more people on my team could have this training. It would be great if we had
Mm.
consistency in our training. And so we created a membership program. And I want to be clear that this membership program is not a simple packaging of goods, because if you've ever tried it and it worked, please let me know, because we tried it everywhere where we simply had packages and it just didn't work. What we did though, and again, this is, I use the term we here because it was a lot of people, is we put together existing products and made them available for an entire department. But on top of that, we added what we call a white glove personalized experience. Now, this membership program was called Propel. We created different flavors of it depending on the type of customer cohort. And we did this under the cover of night with very little investment, and I mean very little investment. And that white glove, we had to kind of look internally. So we're not spending money. What can we give our customers that we have right now that would make them feel special and want to pay the premium for this? And I see a lot of my beloved instructors and subject matter experts on the phone. And what we decided is, people trust these subject matter experts and they want access. And so what we added on top of just enterprise access or
Yeah.
department-wide access was custom training that was delivered at semi-regular intervals and ask the expert services. And we found that that was the mix. And we went to market with something that, again, shoestringed, and it took off. People really responded very well to it.
Yeah, yeah. Did the I mean, from your point of view, I think if you stayed in the president role, it sounds like you would not have been at those client meetings. I'm guessing somebody else would have been. So
Yeah.
the actual work you were doing, as you said, it was product centric, but you were rolling up your sleeves here. You weren't directing resources. Is that kind of true, or?
Yeah, and it was still directing resources, but it really freed up brain space. And I know that sounds silly, but it's like when you are in that president role and you've got your primary responsibility is that P&L and people, you just, there's so little creative brain space. And not that the presidents on this call don't have that creative brain space, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying is sometimes you just need time to think.
Yeah,
And that's what that did for me. And
yeah,
it also re-energized, I guess, stepping away from direct product management a little bit too and coming back to it, re-energized what I loved about it. And then you talk about the idea of a culture where you can take risks. So we talked a little bit about being able to take personal risks. One of the things I love about Dan Oswald and my current boss, Dave Tellos, on this phone is we have a culture where, and I hope everybody on the phone from Simplify feels this way, you're gonna mess up. And there are going to be mistakes. And while it's not, you're not just given a complete pass, it's this culture of like, okay, what do we do? Let's move forward. And I think in this product in particular, we made a lot of a lot of mistakes, but I didn't stop moving because I didn't feel punished. I felt like I could take these risks with the product and be free to take those risks without fear of any sort of retribution.
yeah, yeah, yeah. To me, I mean, there's so many inspiring parts of what you're saying, Elizabeth, but I think like when I think of our organizations, we do have the advantage that they're smaller. We're not talking about Elon Musk here.
Mhm.
We're talking where those of us on this call do have direct control over getting people into jobs they truly enjoy, that kind of thing. So so, in a perfect world, if you've got somebody on staff who loves client contact,
Yes.
you want to increase the amount of time they're doing that on a daily basis. And when the math works correctly, it's beneficial to the organization. It's beneficial to the individual, and it's fun for management. It's like,
That's right.
people seem happy here. So could we just, Ed's put up a question, so I'll switch to that, because obviously the discussion is broader than this, but I would, you obviously have referred to your friends and colleagues who are on this call at Simplified. Could you maybe just talk about what you saw, highs and lows in that transaction? I think when we first talked, I think at one point you used the term humanized, like there was something about this that humanized the work. I don't know if that's relevant, but just talk about the impact as you went through the transition, and then you started to succeed with this enterprise membership model.
Yeah, I think one of the things I remember, I was managing, and this person is no longer with the business, and she was having a very difficult time. And she told me, nobody will listen to me, and I cannot be a leader unless I have the title. And when
Mm.
I knocked myself down a few levels and I did not have the title,
Yeah,
one of the things that I wanted to, and I hope it's working, is how do you lead when you don't have the title and the organizational, like, people have to live, have to do what I say.
yeah,
And I think that can be, and I don't always do it well, but I think it can be a more powerful type of leadership. Um, and and again, what I hope this does is to tell people it's okay to feel like you need some sort of change. And we always hope that people will feel comfortable making that change within our
yeah,
organization. And
yeah,
so to be a hand raiser and say, look, I need something different for myself, personally and professionally.
yeah, yeah. Well, I've been knowing you, through Nude and SIP all the years, and I'm sure everybody else on this call would say that uh, despite your hibernation recently, you've always earned that, I guess, leadership perspective and trust from everybody in this group. So I'm sure that's close to what happened in Simplify. So, that's the the other thing, obviously, is that we're in this absolutely bizarre employment environment. And as I understand it, you're primarily in the Boston market as a core employment place, and that in the US, that's notoriously one of the worst employment markets because of the presence of competitive employers. So I mean, obviously there must have been a huge benefit there too, of keeping people
Mhm.
excited about the job and realizing it was a healthy workplace. And
Yeah.
anything come to mind there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably all facing it. The job market is so competitive right now, and salaries, they're coming down a little bit, but they're inflated. And this is hard when somebody's coming in and they can't actually see the culture. But I do hope, I know I see a lot of my team and colleagues on the call who have been with the business for a very long time. And one of those benefits that you can't necessarily list out when you're posting a job on LinkedIn is the idea that you can be someplace where you're safe and you can take risks and you can be passionate about
Yeah,
the path that you're taking.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Ed, do you want to jump in with your comment, and if other people want to have raised hands or things like that at this point, just to follow up on any of these things?
Sure. Thanks, David, and thanks, Elizabeth, for this conversation. Very, very interesting. And Elizabeth, I know we've had bits of conversations over many years about various things you've done. I think you're an amazing, high energy, passionate person, and to have the I think the recognition that you can't have it all, you can't really have it all. And I think that's a message, and unfortunately, in this world, that it's more a message that women suffer with hearing or not hearing than men. But I think the reality is, it's not only women that hear that, that have that issue, but and what I think is great is you had that self-awareness, and Dan is thinking long term. I mean, you're still pretty early in, relatively early in your career, maybe getting to early mid-career. So it's not like, you could have been teaching the preschool for the last 8 years, and there are a lot of young soccer players in the area who have been let down because you weren't there to coach them in high school. And I really blame that on Dan.
Yeah.
So, but Dan was able to think bigger, and you were able to think bigger and take down your role. Now, who knows, 5-10 years from now, what you'll be doing. If you're at Simplify, and for all I would, if I had to put money, I'd bet that. But who knows what you'll be doing then. But I just think that's such a huge lesson about sort of self-awareness on both sides, the employer and employee there, and to the point David mentioned, the sort of need for real communication there, and the safe space, and employers that don't create that safe space really do themselves a disservice, because again, Dan could have been without a great employee, and you could have been off teaching preschool. So but then the last thing, I'd be interested in your thoughts on sort of companies pushing people to get back in the office, particularly full-time. But even, I know people are bristling even at 2 days a week. So what are your thoughts on that, having gone through the experience you've gone through?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very complicated issue. We are back 1 day a week. And I was actually, so I think, one of the challenges with Simplify is not only do we have 4 primary offices, but throughout the pandemic, we've hired across the country. So even if I wanted to, I could not be in an office with Lori Prescott, who is one of my staff members on this, because she lives in Pennsylvania. And I do think that there are some pros. I talked to a colleague who's also on this call, and she said yesterday, I'm glad I went into the office. Getting out of my house was a good thing, and seeing people. So I think it's complicated, but it does add layers of complexity, particularly for either working parents, people who have caregiving responsibilities. So no easy answer. Easy answer.
Lori, since you just posted something right on that topic, do you want to chime in to follow up? Or if you don't, I can cover for you if everyone sees the chat. I think I didn't mean to call you out. I just appreciated the comment about the
Lori, so everybody knows Lori is absolutely a celebrity in her space, clinical documentation integrity. And I like Lori's perspective, because Lori came from a healthcare setting, and so she's able to. And one of the things we talk about is when we have people coming in who worked for either a consulting company or even some more formal hospitals, what Simplify, HC Pro, or Actis can offer employees is pretty powerful. It's hard to, if you've never seen outside and what it's like, it's hard to appreciate, but it is. It's the idea that you can find joy at work, I think, is very powerful.
Yeah, I think that it's particularly relevant, I think, if you're going into an enterprise membership model.
Yes.
Because there's so much client contact, and it's got to be at a high level. So if you've got a bunch of depressed people on your
Yes.
end, it's just not going to work at all, is it? I mean, it's like,
Th-
it's
I
essential.
mean, that is, so I'm looking at my team members, and I'm sorry to keep picking on you guys, but for instance, Michelle is relatively new to the company, and she is one of our most direct client facing, and
Yeah,
she's repeatedly mentioned how much she likes Simplify, and that comes through in her dealings with our customers.
yeah,
They love her. They
yeah,
love the company, therefore, and so it is very powerful.
yeah. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people on this call. I mean, Cindy, Lisa, who works with me, Julian. I've had conversations with you about this, and I mean, a whole and Andy and I have had great conversations about this. But the the result of that environment where you have the comfort every day. I
Hmm.
mean, even presumably right now, while we're on this call, Elizabeth, you have 2 or 3 people who are directly talking to clients right now. You don't look terrified that they're embarrassing the company. You look
No.
relaxed, like, and that's the essence of, I think, particularly because we all are migrating to some version of the membership model. That's the direction of our entire profession. I don't see how
Mhm.
you could do that without this kind of transparency, openness, how are you doing? It's,
Yes.
yeah,
I mean, I absolutely agree. That it's interesting you mentioned that a successful membership model is dependent on having people you can trust and people who can
yeah,
represent the business
yeah,
well. And I've been so fortunate that I've never had to worry about that here.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's one of the recipes for success.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, would it did when you made this change, did did other people change job descriptions, or were you able to make this change without I mean, that can also be a win-win thing. You can have a realignment of a whole group,
Yeah.
but did it kind of work that most people stayed in the same position, or like
Kind
how
of. It's
yeah,
interesting because I'm one of my employees who's on the call. I with this one of the first reorganization, I put her in a role that was perfect for her because she has an immense set of skills, but she didn't love, and she was a great sport about it, but I know she did not love it. And I will tell you though, an opportunity then opened up. It may have felt like an eternity for her, but not too long afterwards, to put her in a role that she was extraordinarily passionate about. So yes, there was some reorganization, and I know that we put people in roles that they did not love, but slowly and through the communication and people saying this is what I like to do, and it may not happen right away. You may not have you may not come forward and say I want to be doing this, and suddenly we happen to have the dream job. It may be
yeah,
2 or 3 years later, but gosh, how
yeah,
powerful is it when you can match people's passion with
yeah.
jobs?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you mentioned it right at the top of the call, but you and I also talked about it, that the so I think it's worth going back to at this point, that seeing, I mean, I hardly see myself as a role model, but to the degree any of us can, the transparency and what I call courage of the change you made,
Hmm.
that, I mean, that's got to make it easier for everyone around you to say, oh, this is acceptable, this is an opportunity. And it may, you can do career road mapping that takes 3 years, but if people trust you and know you're trying to move in a direction, even I mean, I think you can generate incredible loyalty and team spirit. That takes a lot of transparency and ongoing communication and that sort of stuff too. So
Yeah.
the enabling factor. Maybe if anyone else has observations or questions on this case study, please jump in. But I could maybe just in the last couple of minutes, and I don't mean to go straight back to the P&L, which is where we started moving away from, but you sort of started the product development here. You're now many years in. This is one of the most significant divisions now. It's like a core business model.
Mhm.
So first of all, congratulations on that. Victoria Meller must have been a great coach, since we all remember, for those of you who haven't heard Victoria speak, when she went through, like, drop all the subscribers, go to enterprise membership, cold stop. So she's sort of the rock star in that area, I guess. But how did the you started on a shoestring?
Yeah.
Tell me, just describe for everyone how the business model worked out since then.
So very well, and there was some skepticism because this was a different model, but
Yeah.
since then I can't I don't know how many years in we are right now, but this membership product line has become one of our fastest growing. It does a few things for us that align with our strategic goals, which is to increase average order value, move more towards subscription, because you can throw a lot of things in there that may not be subscription, but when they're part of a membership, they become a subscription.
Yeah.
And our retention rate, our revenue retention rate, is over 100%, because my team has done a fantastic job. I could not be more grateful of identifying opportunities, and not just with price increases, but adding on other products. And so the business impact, I think, of happiness in finding people, putting people in roles that match their skills, it's real. And I know it sounds like a soft skill, and a lot of people may roll their eyes at it, but it does end up working.
Yeah. You mentioned, I think average account value is a metric for this new thing. Yeah, having people in the roles that facilitate that, I think.
Yes.
I mean, that's also a whole mindset for everyone. So on top of the fact that you were changing what you were doing, the way the business operated and measured success was evolving.
Absolutely. Yep.
Did you do a lot of training around that? After you, like, how did you handle that? And the reason I'm asking that, obviously, is probably half the people on this call are doing that now. BVR, we're moving from renewal rates to average account value as a core KPI. So how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, it is, you're right. It is different KPIs. We used to look at things like, really simple renewal rates. Now we look at things like average contract value, average contract term. Revenue retention is something that I had never really looked at. So it did. And I have to say, though, we are still evolving. And I have members of our team are on this call, but I have a product manager, Julie McCoy, who came in with no membership experience and has taken big risks to figure out how to best manage this, because it's a different onboarding experience. It's a different account management experience. And so again, changing the tires in the car while you're driving 65 miles per hour, but we're offering that service. So we have to be careful to not interrupt that service. So yeah, it is different. And I think we've all made that commitment to each other that we're okay making mistakes, and we collaboratively fix. We do not finger point. That
those of you on the call who've been around for a while, BVR I bought from Shannon Pratt, who did a great job starting the business, but he was sort of notorious as one of his legacy employees, who's now retired, said Shannon was the perfect, if everything goes well, take credit, and if it goes poorly, point fingers kind of manager. So nice, that might work in a subscription-based environment, but it's not going to work in an enterprise license environment at all. I think the business has changed. And so maybe sort of as a, this is working perfectly as we come up in the end. And again, if anyone wants to post comments, go ahead. But your image about moving changing the tires, but you made this change, started a new area that kind of changed the way the company operated. But like, could you talk a little bit about the roles that changed from the old model in terms of for instance, the split between a sales function and a customer success function and a subject matter expert function, because you've now had a few years, wherever you ended up on that curve as of now.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of simple employees started as editors, and that role has very much morphed into a product role. And I also think it's very important, and something that my team does exceptionally well is the blurring of lines from, and some people are not comfortable in this environment, and I understand that, but the blurring of lines between marketing, product, sales has actually been a key to success, because we could not grow if we had somebody being like, that's not my responsibility. I'll wait for sales to come in. And my team does that exceptionally well. And so I think, I think journalists make excellent product people because of that intellectual curiosity. You apply it slightly differently. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the main takeaways is people being comfortable in having that trust, being comfortable with the unknown, and trusting that your leaders are going to help you through and get to that end goal.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other organizations I've been involved with is CCC, not too far from you, based in Danvers, Massachusetts, and a much bigger organization. I think it's 600 million. So many times bigger than BVR, for instance. But when you look at the kind of their whole approach to customer success, and there can be 15 people involved with one client, and within the client group there are now 10 product champions. There's not one product champion. So I mean, the kind of people, whether they're journalists or not, who are thrilled by that being part of that complexity.
Exactly.
It's again, it's worth noting that most of us came into this business doing direct mail or marketing. Like this is like we're on a different galaxy at this point. And I don't, since we're right on time now, maybe Elizabeth, if you don't mind, I just OTO is intended to look at strategies that are a tiny part of the information industry. And I think, just what you've done, Elizabeth, is just a role model for the strategy of personal leadership. Yes, we made mistakes, but clarity, intentionality, and I don't think there's a person on this call who wouldn't succeed better if, to the degree we could sort of emulate that part of your story. So Andy, thank you for the comment. That's a beautiful comment for those of you who are looking at the chat. So I'll wrap up since we're right on time, just saying, Elizabeth, thank you. This has been fun from start to finish with the conversations we've had. I hope everyone's enjoyed it, and I really hope to see as many of you as possible in 2 weeks.
Yes, I will not be there, but I'm hobbiting again for a little while, but I will be thinking of you guys. And if you please reach out to me, I'm relatively easy to find on LinkedIn, E Petersen, SEN, which I think is Danish, at hcpro.com. I will talk about rugby, strongman, membership programs, cats, anything you want to talk about. I love connecting with people in this group. It's been one of the most meaningful things in my professional career.
Yeah, same here. Thanks to everyone. It's great to see you all, and look forward to the next one. Elizabeth, you're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I will talk to you all hopefully very soon.
Bye-bye.